Hello and welcome to Bangladesh Today. I am Smita Prakash. Bangladeshi authorities have asked immigration officials to be alert while checking travel documents of Pakistani nationals. This after intelligence reports indicated that Pakistanis entering the country could carry out terror attacks. It also follows the arrest of 3 Pakistani nationals in Bangladesh who are members of the Tehreek Taliban Pakistan. To discuss this and more, we have with us this week Sushant Sareen, a security expert and consultant at the Institute of Defence Studies and Analysis in New Delhi. Thank you for speaking with us. I'd like to begin by asking, 3 operatives were caught, 3 TTP operatives were caught in Dhaka last week, and they said that they had come to Dhaka with orders to wage a jihad, and especially during the elections and in Bangladesh. And later they got the orders to move to Myanmar from there. And these people were supposedly Pakistani nationals from Myanmar. Tell me, how significant is this development?
Over the years, in fact, in the last 5 years and slightly more, since the Awami League government came to power in Bangladesh, they have been busting a number of these modules. But this is probably the first time it's the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan operatives who have been caught inside Bangladesh. Earlier, we had people from the Lashkar-e-Taiba and other groups, but this is the first time the TTP guys have been caught. That is to some extent understandable, because if you look at Bangladesh had its own major terrorist networks which belong to the Harkatul Jihadul Islami. The Huji guys later transformed into what was called the Jamaatul Bangladesh and Jamaatul Mujahideen. All these characters, in a sense, the mother organization was Huji, and Huji had very strong links in Myanmar with the Rohingya Muslims, and a lot of their origins are traced out there. A lot of these Burmese Muslims actually came into Pakistan over the years. And apparently now they have become a kind of a fertile ground for recruitment for the Huji and other organizations.
Including the TTP.
Look, TTP in a sense is also a sort of an offshoot of Huji.
Okay.
Because Huji, being the original Deobandi terrorist organization, had the spin-offs are people who had links with Huji, who have now gone into the TTP, become part of the TTP. A lot of other networks,
Jaish-e-Mohammed and the others, they also had their origins.
Jaish-e-Mohammed also had its origins in the Huji. So all these fellows have now, TTP has become in a sense the umbrella organization. Okay. Of course, there are other things which have got attached with TTP. And it's partly an indigenous kind of a movement as well from the tribal areas. But a lot of the other element, for example, a lot of these Punjabi Taliban are also part of the TTP, but also trace their origins. Those organizational links go back to Huji, Harkatul Ansar.
But when we're talking about the TTP, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, isn't their area of activity restricted to just Pakistan? Are they active at all in, say, Jammu and Kashmir, which they think is a disputed part, or it should be with Pakistan? So is the TTP just a Pakistan organization, or are they, do they have more ambitious plans?
They haven't really, their footprints haven't been found in Jammu and Kashmir as of now. But it is, their links are found far beyond Pakistan. In Afghanistan, definitely. But for example, there have been reports of TTP guys who have gone into Syria to fight.
Okay.
There are also reports that originally a lot of the TTP firepower, or in a sense their training manuals, if you will, came from people like Al-Zarqawi and others in Iraq. So, those links make it, in a sense, a transnational organization. The TTP, although it has this thing that it's a Pakistan-based organization, it's Pakistani militants, there are all sorts of other characters who are attached to it. The Chechens, the Uzbeks, the Tajiks, you name it, the Uyghurs, all sorts of characters are part of the TTP networks as well. Also have very close links with the Al-Qaeda. So in a sense, if the Al-Qaeda is the overarching organization, The Taliban is, in a sense, the mother organization.
And the
then
Houthi
the
too.
TTP and others are kind of phalanxes of the Taliban.
Okay.
But because of their transnational links, they also get involved in fights in other parts of the world. And as we can make out from this particular arrest, that if the TTP has now started making a beeline for Bangladesh and perhaps Myanmar, because Myanmar and the tensions between the Rohingyas and the Buddhists in Myanmar are actually becoming, in a sense, a cause for coalescing a lot of these characters. It's become a cause celebre, if you will, for many of these Islamist jihadist groups, which believe in fighting all over the world.
JUD had in fact put out these videos about the Rohingya Muslims and things like that, and they had tried to evoke some kind of a program, as you may call it, which goes all across the subcontinent, where they could mobilize people to fight in Myanmar.
You see, it's not only the Jamaat-ud-Dawa oblique Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is the same organization. It's a kind of a corporate wheel which they have kept to keep those two separate. Of course, they have been found involved in Bangladesh, and they have made a lot of song and dance about what has happened in Myanmar. But along with them, the Jamaat-e-Islami. So a whole lot of these guys have been agitating inside Pakistan on the issue of what has been happening in Myanmar, the tensions inside Myanmar. And of course, Bangladesh also, with the recent hanging of the mass murderer Abdul Qadir Mullah.
They had issued a threat to the Bangladesh High Commission in Islamabad. Just a couple of weeks ago, they had issued this threat, and now these people have been found. I mean, there is a link to all this, isn't
Well,
it?
I wouldn't, because I think the timing would probably suggest that these guys who have been found in Bangladesh, it would have been happening much before than just this Abdul Qadir Mullah hanging.
But with, they had these bombing manuals on them. Now, the war crimes trials are going to go on as scheduled. I mean, especially after Sheikh Hasina's victory, they are going to happen. And if there is another execution, these guys might have executed some kind of a bomb blast or something where, the casualties would have been very high, and then they would have put out the video saying that this is what was engineered by them, which is typical of TTP, which they always do. So,
Well,
in a way,
yes, in fact, that is one of the fears. And what has been happening is that the kind of agitation which has been going on, which is partly political and partly religiously motivated, partly funded and supported by fanatics all over the world, with the Jamaat-e-Islami being in the forefront of this agitation. What has been happening is that they have been exciting a lot of passions inside Bangladesh as well. And they have been creating a climate in which this kind of terrorism is seen as being kosher. And unfortunately,
kosher where?
by a lot of people who are agitated about the kind of the war crimes trials which are going on in Bangladesh. And unfortunately, some amount of support, perhaps wittingly or unwittingly, is also being given by Western countries like the US, by the UK, and
Who are silent on.
yeah, who are not only silent, who seem to be leaning in favor of the Jamaat-e-Islami. Look, the guys who are being convicted are certified mass murderers. Let's not put too fine a point on it.
When you're saying leaning in favor of the Jamaat-e-Islami, what you're actually saying is that they are talking about human rights violations supposedly, and that the Jamaat-e-Islami is on the side of or against the war crimes, and that's why you feel that this is a support extended to terror organizations which are linked to the Jamaat.
Ideally, they should be supporting the Bangladesh government, which is actually cracking down and doing the kind of stuff which other governments in Muslim countries should be doing against the fundamentalists and the extremist elements. The Bangladesh government has taken a very unambiguous stand, this particular government. Within Bangladesh civil society, I think probably the most potent movement against fundamentalism we have seen in Shahbag Square. And yet, Tahrir Square became such a big deal for the West. Shahbag movement was, in a sense, completely ignored by the West. In fact, even in India, it did not receive much traction except for some people who looked at it very closely. Bangladesh is a country which needs to be supported and which can stand out as a beacon against the kind of wave of fundamentalism and extremism which is sweeping through Muslim societies all over the world.
Correct.
And yet what we see is this kind of a dubious role which the Western countries are playing by putting pressure on the Sheikh Hasina government to go slow on the war crimes tribunal trials, for example. Also in a number of other issues, it was a perfectly fair and free election, and yet, putting question marks, questioning the credibility of that election. Stuff like that emboldens the hardline element.
Is Sheikh Hasina, has she been successful in cracking down on the Huji, cracking down on terror networks in Bangladesh, and terror training networks especially, because if the TTP is moving in out there, that means they're going to be setting up terror training camps. Has she been successful in crushing the Huji, and will she be successful in crushing the TTP if they are making inroads into Bangladesh now?
Look, this problem is not, it's not just switching on and switching off something. Her work is just partially done. Let me put it this way. In the last 5 years of her government, the government of Bangladesh, shed that kind of an ambivalent role which other governments in Bangladesh had been playing, even Sheikh Hasina's earlier government, where they were not going whole hog.
Because she had Jamaat-e-Islami as
because she had the Jamaat as one of her partners. But this time around, she left no stone unturned to crack down on these networks. She went hell for leather behind these characters. But the problem is far more deep-seated, and just one 5-year term will perhaps not be enough to clean the kind of mess which was created by the Jamaat and the BNP and others inside Bangladesh. So let me put it this way, her work was partially done, and perhaps in this particular term of hers, she might be able to go a lot further than what she has gone. Having said that, it must be admitted that this particular government in Bangladesh went much farther than anybody ever expected them to go. Right. So to that extent, I think she deserves all the praise which one can give.
See, one has seen that her government and the Indian government cooperated on security related issues. We cracked down on several terror modules because of the cooperation between the two governments. Tell me, can SAARC play a role in curbing this menace of terrorism, which is like across all the SAARC nations? Is it possible, if SAARC comes across as a strong grouping, can they battle the menace of terrorism in this region?
Look, that theoretically that would be the ideal situation, but for that it is important that all the countries inside SAARC do not have these double games and these double crosses. For example, Pakistan is a notorious problem, and Pakistan has been found involved in what has been happening inside Nepal, for example, against India. They've been trying to use Nepal. In Bangladesh, their footprints have been found. So, in
an idealistic situation.
In an idealistic situation, because this is a common problem for all the countries, it is going to affect the security and stability of every country in the region. For example, in Nepal also, if you look at that Terai belt, there are a lot of concerns being expressed about the growth of these characters in this belt, using this as a kind of a base to make forays into India, using it as a safe haven. In fact, some of the guys in India, some of the big names who have been caught in this belt. So to that extent, we have got some cooperation from the Nepalese government. But ideally, if all the countries, including Afghanistan, since you mentioned SAARC, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, if all these countries were to cooperate, there would be intelligence sharing, there would be probably joint operations if required. That does not mean that Indian officers are going into Pakistan to arrest people, but you coordinate your action.
And especially like the immigration points at
absolutely.
All these
so you can crack down. If that level of cooperation was to come, then this problem would become that much more manageable. But if in public forum, the Pakistanis say something, but in private they carry out their own dirty games, then this whole thing becomes a work of fiction. Then it's just a theoretical construct that SAARC can actually play a role in combating terrorism. But if they were to come with all sincerity and seriousness, then of course I think this is something which is the need of the hour.
Thank you very much for speaking with us, Sushant. And that's all we have for you. But before we leave, here's the News Roundup section.
Awami League General Secretary Sayyid Ashraful Islam has termed the public statement made by BNP chairperson Khalida Zia about operations of joint forces in Satkhira as treasonable. Ashraful urged Khalida to apologize and take back the statement that she had made during a rally earlier this week. Commerce Minister Tofail Ahmed has made an appeal to end the ongoing conflict to ensure stable economic development. Ahmed also said that economy and politics should not be mixed for the sake of the growth of the country. Muslims across the world congregated at a small village in Bangladesh for the yearly Bishwa Ijtima or World Congregation, the second biggest mass get-together after Hajj. Joining their hands in a special prayer, they encouraged peace, harmony and spirit of brotherhood. Members of India's right-wing Hindu group, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, protested against the violent attacks on the Hindu community in Bangladesh. The protesters took to streets of India's Bhopal city and raised slogans against the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, blaming them for attacking Hindus.